Conservative free speech advocate and founder of Turning Point USA, Charlie Kirk, was assassinated while speaking to students in Utah on September 10th. Why has political discourse in the U.S. become so deadly? And what are the spiritual implications? Dr. Alveda King is here to react. A controversial LGBT pilgrimage took place at the Vatican over the weekend, and a traditional Latin Mass will be celebrated in October at St. Peter's Basilica. Independent Vatican journalist Diane Montagna tells us what it all means. And defense and counterterrorism expert Clare Lopez discusses the Kirk assassination, Israel's recent strike on Hamas in Qatar, and more. The world over begins right now.
Now, Raymond Arroyo.
A warm welcome to all of you joining us in the United States and the world over. An important and solemn show for you this week. If you'd like to comment, send an X post. I'm at Raymond Arroyo and at Arroyo Grande Show on YouTube. The news of the assassination of Charlie Kirk shocked the nation this week as political dialogue turned deadly. While speaking to and engaging with students at a Utah university, the free speech advocate and founder of Turning Point USA was gunned down with a single bullet. Why Charlie Kirk? And why have U.S. politics become so polarized? Joining me with her perspective is a woman who knows something about politically motivated violence. She's the niece of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr., and founder of Alveda King Ministries. Please welcome back to the program, Dr. Alveda King. Alveda, thank you for being here. This was such a shocking turn of events in a setting so familiar to Charlie and his Turning Point USA family, engaging students. And I should say, I knew Charlie. I interviewed him many times on Fox, conversed with him about faith and the news. We'd text off and on throughout the years. His faith was really the centerpiece of everything he did, Alveda. And I would argue it was increasingly part of his public expressions. What are your initial thoughts when you heard the news of Charlie's assassination, and what do you think motivated this?
Raymond, I was so very startled when I got the news that Charlie had been shot, and my heart immediately went to him and his family, his beautiful wife, his little children, and my prayers, having experienced those kinds of occurrences in my own family, I immediately went into prayer. And Charlie and I shared that Christian faith. We didn't always agree with everything, but we made our peace together. And so I just am praying for his family, his wife, his children. And it's very important during these times. I would remind us to call for peace, to call for prayer. And I know Charlie would want us to do that as well. I was very, very startled, and it broke my heart. And so I immediately prayed and did some good deeds for others. And I just, encourage everyone to pray, to love, to repent, to forgive.
Yeah, Alveda, and that's so hard because, look, and we'll talk later about the influence on young people, but I've been talking to a lot of them, particularly young men who listened to, followed Charlie every day. They are angry. They're very upset. They're furious over this. But tell me, before we get to that, what do you think motivated this and drove this shooter to do this? I mean, we don't know the exact motive, but culturally speaking, what do you think is driving this?
I know we're going to get to this in a moment, but you're a Christian man, a man of faith yourself. And I know you would say to those young men and young women, be angry and sin not. Now, we're living in tumultuous times, and social media drives us to retaliate, to strike back. I want to remind people that if you don't agree with someone, you don't shoot the person. You pray, you talk, and you consider your position. But this violence is just absolutely wrong. So we're living among a time of violence and anger and fear and frustration. So that leads me to say to everyone, fear not, listen, love, communicate. Do not
Yeah.
move and resort to acts of violence. Just don't do it.
Yeah. Alveda, you know, watching that horrible moment, and I only allowed myself to do it once because it was so gutting and nauseating, frankly. You know, someone sent me that image very early on, before any news had really come out. And it was, you know, to see a friend go through something like that is just, it's awful. But it made me think, these are people for whom ideology has become religion. And therefore, and I'm doing a whole thing on this on Arroyo Grande, which you can listen to elsewhere, but it seems as if they've allowed their ideology to move into the very center of their lives and hearts, and anything that opposes that or in any way violates it, they feel freedom to go to violent measures, to even kill. And I mean, Charlie Kirk, this is a father of two, happily married guy, a warrior. He respected the opposition enough to engage them without shouting or dismissing them, though they would often shout him down. Alveda, what's happening in American society that's making violence an acceptable option for some citizens in the place of dialogue?
Well, can I talk also about the beautiful young lady from Ukraine who was stabbed on the train? And people took their telephones and put on social media her death. She was bleeding there. Nobody tried to staunch the bleeding or stop the bleeding. And so to take the graphic pictures and watch Charlie die or watch the young lady die, what are we doing in the world? What are we doing in America? Why have we forgotten? We can blame it on COVID and say, well, we depersonalized everybody. We had on masks. We couldn't see each other. We didn't know they were human anymore. We've said that about the babies in the womb as well. But here, right within the last several hours, two young people, Charlie Kirk and this beautiful woman from Ukraine, and people captured it on social media and did nothing to assist or rescue. That's something to think about.
Yeah, well, it's a desensitization. We're desensitizing ourselves through the repetition of this. It's really death as entertainment, Alveda. And look, TV media has contributed to that a lot because they love putting these graphic images out there, and you can't turn away from the train wreck, but it's desensitizing you and reprogramming you in many ways. And I share your horror when that poor woman's sitting there in the train and people are watching her. She's getting stabbed, and they just look over like, oh, well, you know, I'm waiting for my stop. And then they go on about their business. It's terrifying.
Crazy.
Right. Alveda, decades ago, put this in context for me. I've been hearing a lot from young people, college kids, for whom Charlie's murder seems to be a turning point for them, particularly today. In a way, it feels for them like your uncle's murder or RFK's murder, because those became galvanizing moments in American history for certain groups of Americans, if not the whole country. Put this in context for us. What do you think? I mean, he was the leader of hundreds of thousands of young people on campuses all across the country and even internationally.
Well, you know, my uncle, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was shot. My father, Reverend Alfred Daniel Williams King, was killed and thrown in a swimming pool. My grandmother, Alveda King, was shot. You've got the Reagan assassination attempt, the death of President Kennedy, and it does go on and on. For me, I am a Christian. I still have the peace and the joy of the Lord, but it's almost like a trauma or a trigger point when those things happen. And so I believe in every decade, every generation, every platform, every genre, we're going to have to do what my uncle talked about, and that is regard for human dignity, to walk away from man's inhumanity to man. And so we've got to care again. We've got to see human beings as human beings. And you've heard me say many times, from the womb to the tomb and beyond. We cannot, we've got to get back to a point of caring, of loving, of repenting, of forgiving. Therein lies the answer.
Yeah. Now, I want to talk for a moment about Charlie Kirk, the man. As I mentioned, he was a husband, a father, a friend to so many, even those with whom he disagreed, he interacted with. In recent weeks, he's often been seen at St. Bernadette's Church in Arizona. And though he was an evangelical, he had great respect for the Catholic Church. I know that from my interactions with him, where he talked about, you know, the Virgin Mary or the Eucharist or the Pope. I mean, he was genuinely curious about the faith. And it appears he and his family had been attending Mass almost every week, if not every week. He was once asked how he wanted to be remembered, and he said this, Alveda.
I want to be remembered for courage for my faith. That would be the most important thing. The most important thing is my faith in my life.
Alveda, your reaction, and did that make him a target, do you think? Because Charlie Kirk wasn't just talking about the latest Trump administration policy. If you listen closely to what he was talking to those college kids about, and the thing that was exciting them, it was really traditional Christian doctrine and morality.
I believe, as I reflect on Charlie now, I'm not so sure exactly what the motivation was. I believe that he was a voice for faith, and he will be remembered as such. And I'd like to remember him with this message: now abides faith, hope, and love. The greatest of these is love. I believe if Charlie was actually here today, he would probably agree with me on that scripture. And that's the way that I do remember Charlie.
Yeah, no, he was a happy guy. I mean, he always had a smile on his face. You know, and the other thing, and this is rare, Alveda, you know, I would do a bit I'd appear in the media and do something, and I'd be in the car on the way home or getting to a taxi, and my phone would bleep, and it would just be Charlie saying, "That was amazing. You made me laugh. It was the first big smile I've had tonight." You know, and I might not have spoken to him for months, and then suddenly that would drop. He was a really cheerful, sweet guy, always willing to engage in thoughtful debate as well. Those prove me wrong tables at the colleges really became his hallmark. He had this to say about what happens when dialogue and discussion become anathema in a country. And he said, when people stop talking, really bad stuff starts. When marriages stop talking, divorce happens. When civilization stops talking, civil war ensues. When you stop having a human connection with someone you disagree with, it becomes a lot easier to want to commit violence against that group. Alveda, the assassin's bullet struck just after Charlie had been asked a question about trans people and mass shootings. His words here were quite prescient. Your thoughts about where we are in the United States when civil dialogue ends, and it seems we're at that point now, which terrifies me, to be honest.
In my relationship with Charlie, I fought very hard to keep that dialogue, to keep that human connection. And we didn't always agree on everything. And again, I would suggest that if Charlie were here right now, he would say, don't give up, continue to communicate. And I just want to remember him as a man of faith.
Yeah. You know, so often the conversations he had with young people, and I think it was part of his appeal, it wasn't just the doctrine. He was giving them a model and an example of what a fully lived life could be. And he was a great evangelist for not only Christian doctrine, but marry early, have a bunch of kids, this will give your life purpose, this is what you're here for. And he said that again and again and again to young men. And it amazes me. I mean, I'll just be honest, Alveda, I think the reason this lunatic decided to shoot Charlie was certainly motivated by ideology and his great success. And whether it was the shooter or a group of people, and we don't know all the details yet, but we'll find out soon enough. This is my intuition on this. They saw a movement happening where this young man was drawing and winning over young people to his vision for not only life but America, and that was a threat to some people. So they wanted to stop that voice. In the way they wanted to stop Dr. King's voice, they wanted to stop RFK's voice, they wanted to stop Jesus's voice. Give me a sense of the nature and the role that evil plays in all of this, which we often dismiss, Alveda. When you talk about those babies getting shot in Minnesota, or you talk about that young lady on the train you mentioned earlier, or you talk about this heinous slaying, this is evil. It's an expression of evil.
I believe if Charlie were still among us, or my uncle, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, or President Kennedy, or any, they would encourage us to don't seek our answers in humanity or the popularization of human beings. We admire some people as they follow Christ, but to look to Jesus. And I think that is something that Charlie did. I know he was a man of faith. And so we're going to find not our heroes in humanity, but we're going to have to look to Jesus at these times.
It is September 11th, the 24th anniversary of these attacks in Washington, New York, Shanksville. Evil was present that day, Alveda, but so was hope. Your reflections on that anniversary very quickly.
The anniversary of 9/11 or 9/11, it brings its own share of pain, but it should also bring us promise and hope. So I'm going to take this day, 9/11, to do something good for someone, even as we remember those who are no longer with us.
Dr. Alveda King, thank you for your time and insight. You can follow Alveda at Alveda C. King on X. Thank you, my friend. Talk to you soon.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Last weekend, over 1,000 people paraded through the Holy Door of St. Peter's Basilica in what was billed as an LGBTQ Jubilee pilgrimage. Many of the participants are hoping that the event, first recognized on the Vatican calendar at the end of 2024 under Pope Francis, will signal new acceptance of alternative lifestyles within the Catholic Church. Joining me with her analysis of this and more, independent Vatican journalist Diane Montagna. Diane, before we get to the LGBT pilgrimage, some breaking news. Cardinal Parolin, the Vatican Secretary of State, was asked about the Charlie Kirk assassination. Here's what he said.
At the Vatican stand, we are against all type of violence, and we think that we have to be very, very tolerant and very respectful to everybody, even though we don't share the same view.
Diane, your reaction to that?
Not strong enough, and not enough coming from the Vatican. I mean, I did write to Matteo Bruni today asking if Pope Leo, given that he's the first American Pope, might offer a message to Americans at this time. It is good, certainly, that Cardinal Parolin, when asked about it, responded, but it was such a generic comment that could have applied to anyone. I think it would have been better for the Catholic Church, given, you know, Charlie Kirk was not Catholic, but there were signs that he was well on his way, and he was such a force for good, and seemed to have such a deep Christian faith. So had the Vatican handled this well, they would have known who he was. They would have thanked him. They would have expressed condolences to his wife and his very little children. But there was none of that. So what they said, certainly it's good that it was acknowledged, but I would say it was not quite enough.
Yeah, I get into more of this, and you know, I think his wrestling with his faith and his closeness to the Catholic faith is something I got into with the prayerful posse this week on Arroyo Grande, but we haven't time to delve into it here. But I agree with you. They should have said something more. Certainly his wife is Catholic, so I don't know why you wouldn't at least express condolences to the family, which they didn't do. The LGBTQ pilgrimage that caused such an uproar last weekend in Rome was known about since the end of last year, Diane, when in typical Vatican fashion it was added to the calendar, then it was removed, then it was added back again. Vatican organizers have been maintaining all along that the event's inclusion in the calendar was not an official endorsement, merely what they called a logistical tool. Now, Diane, you asked Vatican spokesman Matteo Bruni about the status of this LGBT pilgrimage and what the policy should be for allowing paraphernalia, rainbow flags and banners and T-shirts, etc., into St. Peter's Basilica. What were you told by Bruni and the dicastery?
Yes, well, I mean, this goes back, this was a train wreck coming down the tracks, ready to happen. People might remember that the canonizations of Carlo Acutis and Pier Giorgio Frassati were supposed to happen actually on the day that ended up being Pope Francis's funeral. So all of that got moved to this weekend. Meanwhile, you have the quote-unquote LGBT Jubilee pilgrimage happening on that Saturday, the day before all of the canonizations were happening. So you had young people flooding to Rome. And of course, you know, the danger was that this was going to turn into a pride march on the Via della Conciliazione. So several days before the march, I contacted Matteo Bruni, then I contacted the dicastery, I contacted the Basilica of St. Peter's Basilica, and they all said, well, Matteo Bruni actually never got back to me. And thankfully, I was able to make a call and get in touch with the dicastery for evangelization. Initially, the person who answered the phone when I asked, you know, there's this LGBT pilgrimage, will rainbow flags, other forms of messaging be allowed? And I didn't give a judgment either way. And the person on the phone said, well, I don't think that there's going to be any problem with that. But he said, let me check with my superior. He came back to the call, and contrary to what he just said, he said there would be nothing of that sort allowed, and the only thing allowed would be the standard Jubilee cross that's given to all of these pilgrimage groups as they make their way down the Via della Conciliazione towards the Vatican Basilica, and they take that crucifix into the Basilica with them. So, you know, there was enough advance warning that something could have happened. The day came. I went down just to take some pictures, talk to some people. I did end up talking to one of the main organizers, the head of Tenda di Giornata, Jonathan's Tent, as this Italian organization is called. They were working with Father James Martin's outreach program and another global organization. I asked him, would these things be allowed? And he actually said no. But, you know, he was, 20 feet away from the group that was gathering there to begin the pilgrimage. There was a rainbow cross there. There were people with flags. And so, I mean, in the end, you know, everyone saw those photographs, particularly the photograph of two men, I would say brazenly holding hands in St. Peter's Basilica because they know what the church teaches. And the one with the backpack describing what he thought should be done with the rules. I don't want to go into it on a family program.
Yeah, well, that's nice.
But, you know, I think that was very, I think that was emblematic. What was written on his backpack was, in a sense, emblematic of the attitude.
Yeah. Diane, you asked if this was an officially sanctioned event and what role the Vatican played in this, if any. What do we know?
Well, actually, that was said. Matteo Bruni eventually responded to an Italian journalist, and he told him, I mean, it was a denial. He said the Holy See really didn't have anything to do with this pilgrimage. It was only, other than some organizational things, I would have to defer you to the Dicastery for Evangelization or to the Association Tenda di Giornata. So it was they put it off. It was damage control, and they denied having anything to do with it. But meanwhile, the Dicastery for Evangelization that has been responsible for all of these pilgrimages, they organized it, and that is part of the Roman Curia. So for Matteo Bruni, the Vatican spokesman, to say the Holy See had nothing to do with this is obviously not true.
Well, you mentioned that Jonathan's Tent group, this LGBT group in Italy that was the primary organizer. Of course, Father James Martin's group, Outreach, was also involved. Now, according to Martin, prior to the event and since, he wrote the following: I'm filled with gratitude, not only for the Holy Father's time, but for his message that we should continue Pope Francis's pastoral approach towards LGBTQ Catholics, which is one of openness. It was a deeply consoling meeting. Diane, Father Martin seemed to indicate that Pope Leo is of the same mind as Pope Francis, not welcoming people, but LGBT activism being a part of that welcome. Though we've heard nothing from Leo directly. What should we make of Father Martin's words and Pope Leo's silence?
Yeah, I wouldn't really make too much, honestly, of Father James Martin's words. I mean, it's quite obvious that Father James Martin is out to promote Father James Martin and his interests. And I think in the beginning of the pontificate, he may have been seeing sort of where the winds were going and been more quiet. And now this was his opportunity to go out and put a message that I think served him well. But regarding Pope Leo's silence, I think it was a mistake. I think it was a mistake for him to take the audience, to organize, to receive him an audience, and for the Vatican subsequently not to have issued any sort of statement, particularly after those photographs came out after the LGBT Jubilee in St. Peter's. Bishop Athanasius Schneider has come out this week also saying that it was clearly a mistake. Cardinal Muller, I believe, I spoke to him 2 days ago, thinks it was always also a mistake. But neither one of them think that Pope Leo is naive or unaware. The question is, and I think this is a serious question, Pope Benedict, when he was shortly after his election, and you'll remember, Raymond, it was the Mass, his first Mass in St. Peter's Square, and he said, "Pray for me that I do not run for fear of the wolves." And he did resign. Now, those same wolves, and probably more, are in the Vatican right now. There was a whole infrastructure built up under the pontificate of Pope Francis. Pope Leo, years ago, their strong statements, and even more recently, upholding traditional marriage, he has spoken about the natural law. So it seems deep down, he holds those views. The question is, why didn't he say something? Is he being influenced? And you never know with the Vatican what's going on behind the scenes. So I think we really need to wait and see.
Yeah, and the obscure, oblique answers you get are rarely satisfying. The Pope also, and Diane, this is odd, he unofficially received a Sister Lucia Karam, a noted pro-abortion, pro-gay marriage nun who was very close to Pope Francis. But this meeting, this audience was not in the daily Bulletino. That's a break from protocol when you leave a meeting off of that daily bulletin, right?
Not necessarily. I mean, it's my understanding that there have been other private meetings that he's had, and you never know why he might want to keep those private. I think the issue in this case, and any pope, even Benedict, I mean, he met with Hans Kung. Now, that was a meeting, I believe, happened at Castel Gandolfo. It was very private, so it was nothing like the sort of audience and meeting that Pope Leo has had with either Father James Martin or this sister. The problem that I see is, I don't see inherently a problem with a private meeting between Pope Leo and this sister. Hopefully he will be trying to get her to convert her mind and her heart to Catholicism. The problem is, why were those photographers there? And why did the photographs go out with her somewhat, I would say, inappropriately holding on to his arm? It looked like a bit of a power move, but came off, I would think, as a message that their meeting went very well. Why were the photographers there? And how did those photographs get sent out?
It seems to me, Diane, John Paul II had a very refined, intuitive taste and feeling for the media and how images conveyed doctrine and the Pope's will. This Pope, for whatever reason, this Vatican, seems kind of flat-footed when it comes to using the media to convey messages. And James Martin is really good at it, and so is this sister, apparently. They know how to use the images to convey a message no matter what was said at that meeting. It could have been a complete dress down. We'll never know. But the image has its own power, and I don't think the Vatican is right now fully aware of or appreciates how to use that huge advantage they have of the papacy and the surroundings, and meeting with the Pope himself, because you look at the people they're allowing in to see him, and you wonder why. What's the motivation here? But I don't think there's a motivation. I think it's more of a blunder, or maybe I'm misreading.
Yeah, if I could add, the Vatican, though, if you look back, the Vatican, when they want to do something, they know how to send a message. I mean, remember COVID? Remember those images that were created of Pope Francis out in St. Peter's Square by himself, blessing the world during COVID. That was a big production to pull all of that off. Yeah. And so, but that was the message that they wanted to send. I think the issue with these audiences, there's a much more fundamental issue here. Under Pope John Paul II and under Benedict XVI, these audiences never would have happened. I spoke to Cardinal Muller the other day, asked him about that. He said, yes, he said, because they knew that those photographs and those meetings would be instrumentalized by anti-Christian forces or anti-Christian individuals in order to promote a certain ideology or agenda. So that sort of thing just wasn't done. I think, but under Pope Francis, these sorts of meetings became very, very normal. So the question is Pope Leo to follow his immediate predecessor or his predecessors prior to him?
It was announced this week that Cardinal Raymond Burke will celebrate a traditional Latin Mass inside St. Peter's Basilica on October 25th as part of a traditional pilgrimage. Diane, some are reading this as a sign of genuine outreach and healing on the part of Pope Leo to repair some of the damage done by these draconian restrictions on the traditional Latin Mass by Pope Francis. Is that reading too much into this pilgrimage Mass?
I don't think so, Raymond. There's no way, first it should be said, there's no way that this Mass would be being celebrated and have been allowed without the express and explicit permission of the Pope. I think it should be taken, and from what I'm hearing, it should be taken as a positive sign. It's a first step. So I don't think that, and I don't think that the people who go to the traditional Mass are going to be crying victory over this sort of thing. It's one Mass celebrated in the Basilica. I do think it's a positive sign that the Pope respects the group and that he acknowledges the beauty of the traditional Latin Mass. Hopefully, this will be one step in a much longer process of healing the immense wounds that were caused by Traditionis Custodes.
Yeah, one would hope. And look, it hasn't been permitted in 3 years, this pilgrimage, to actually have a Mass in St. Peter. So I think a lot of people are happy for that and will take the win. Also this week, there was some disappointing news that Pope Leo is suppressing 2 Catholic dioceses in China. These were established by Pope Pius XII, which now forces the recognition of a Chinese government-approved diocese of Zhangjiakou, which is led by a CCP-approved bishop. So, Diane, we continue to see the Vatican sort of heading down this road of that still secret Vatican-China deal that was struck by Pope Francis and Paroline back in 2018. More continuity here. How is this being read in Rome, and what's your take on it?
Well, my sources, whether in Rome or not, they might be further abroad, are telling me that actually what happened here is that the Chinese government had already intended to ordain this bishop and to create the new diocese. And that, in fact, I've been told that on the initial press release put out by the Vatican, it did mention the creation of this new diocese, but it did not mention the episcopal ordination, and that this was basically just another case of the Vatican, the Holy See, catching up behind and going along with what the CCP had already determined what was going to happen. Now, it should be said, you mentioned these 2 dioceses that now the Chinese government has said no longer exist. The Vatican's going along with it. The bishop, the acknowledged bishop of those dioceses, he apparently was, taken away by authorities several times, and his whereabouts are not known. So Obviously, given that we're talking about mainland China, there's a lot of confusion or fog around what exactly is happening, but that's my understanding, that China had intended to go forward.
Yeah, I'm hearing similar things. And this is, this bishop has been repeatedly placed under house arrest. So again, just to make it easy for people watching, because it is complicated, these were dioceses that weren't necessarily, they didn't configure to a county or a city as the Chinese envisioned them. These have been now abrogated. They don't exist any longer. They've been suppressed. And along with them went the underground faithful Catholic bishop that was attached to at least one of those dioceses. And you just shake your head and wondering why, what's happening here? The CCP is clearly, wagging the dog on this. Before we go, the World Meeting on Human Fraternity is scheduled for September 13th at the Vatican. It's being organized by Cardinal Gambretti, the Archpriest of St. Peter's. It's featuring musical performances by Andrea Bocelli and others. There's also a planned drone display that will project Pope Francis's face onto the dome of St. Peter's. Your thoughts on this event, this human fraternity idea, which controversially, you remember Pope Francis sort of made a centerpiece of his pontificate? And what about the drone display?
Yes. So, well, first of all, I mean, this human fraternity event, we got the press release for this a couple of weeks ago, and then following there was a press conference with Cardinal Gambetti. Pope Leo had just made a statement. He received a pilgrimage of French political figures, and it was such a good message. It was such a Christocentric message, and he said in his message to them, the promotion of quote unquote values, and he did use quote unquote values. Even as evangelical as they might seem, if they've been emptied of Christ, they'll do nothing to change the world. So we received this press release about the World Meeting of Fraternity. I went to the press conference and I asked Cardinal Gambetti, Pope Leo has said this just earlier this week. There's nothing in your press release about the Lord. It seems emptied of Christ. And how are these two things compatible? So, he gave a roundabout answer that seemed a bit odd, but coming to the event itself, yes, it seems completely secular. It seems to be, and I spoke to Cardinal Muller about this as well. It seems as though, once again, the Vatican is being handed over as a stage and as a platform for secularized, anti-Christian people or organizations in order to promote this idea of human fraternity that has nothing really to do with Christ. And Cardinal Muller, I think this is very important. Cardinal Muller pointed out that where are these groups, these same groups that are hosted, where are they when it comes to Christian persecution? Where are they when it comes to the de-Christianization of Europe, which is actively happening? They're nowhere to be found. And yet the Vatican hosts these organizations and makes the Vatican, the St. Peter's Square, effectively a stage. Now, regarding this drone, I don't even know what to call it, Raymond. The Vatican announced there are going to be 3,500 drones flying above St. Peter's Square, illuminating the sky, and they're going to project images of the Sistine Chapel onto the dome of St. Peter's. And they highlighted they will also project the face of Pope Francis onto the dome of St. Peter's Basilica. I spoke to Cardinal Muller about this, and he said it seems like the apotheosis of the Roman Senate when they tried to deify the emperor. He said he hopes that it doesn't seem like Stalin or Lenin their pictures being put out in Moscow. And in the end, he questioned, this is the Church of Jesus Christ. The Basilica represents the heart of Catholicism. Why is the face of a pope being projected onto the dome? This is not the Church of Pope Francis. This is the Church of Jesus Christ. And it seems as though, and I have to say, it seems as though there's being made sort of an idol of Pope Francis a bit.
Well,
Pope Leo is going to have...
it sounds like Leo is caught in this trajectory that was already moving, Diane, whether it's the synodality, the forthcoming meetings, this project and concert and drone display. It's like he's caught in some ways, and I guess he could stop it if he wished, but he's reticent. You get the feeling he's a bit reticent and careful about offending anyone and wanting to keep the peace. But I agree with you. I think there's a lot of confusion. And your interview with Cardinal Mueller is on your Substack, correct? Or will be shortly?
It'll be on tomorrow. It'll be on tomorrow,
okay.
Raymond.
Okay. And you can follow Diane Montagna's indispensable reporting on X. She's at Diane Montagna, as well as dianemontagna.substack.com. Thank you, Diane. I want to call your attention over on the Arroyo Grande podcast on our channel, both on YouTube and on the podcast platforms. An amazing live show we did with the Prayerful Posse. Father Jerry, Robert Royal, we got into some amazing topics, and there's a new show dropping on Friday. And on the Arroyo Grande show itself, I sat down with blues guitar legend Kenny Wayne Shepherd, and we talked about how he found his music in the traditions and the examples of the blues legends that preceded him. He also talked about his Catholic faith. Watch. I mean, you saw incredible people even as a little tot.
Yeah, and I do believe that was my first concert. My dad said he took me to see Muddy Waters and John Lee Hooker when I was 3. Now, oh my God. I don't remember the show, but I have to believe that left an imprint. And I do believe that that's what set me on the path of my love and appreciation for blues music. But seeing Stevie I was old enough for it to register. I was old enough I was just in awe of him because he channeled everything. It was like being a conduit, which is what I strive to be on stage. Like what I saw in him was he played with this passion and this intensity that just came through him and went outward. And if you were receiving it, like you couldn't help but feel it. And even at 7 years old, I was like, oh my gosh, and that's all I want to do.
The full Arroyo Grande interview with Kenny Wayne Shepherd and my Culture Counter, where I run down some cultural stories. That's all on YouTube at Arroyo Grande Show or wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, Apple, iHeart, and subscribe. You don't want to miss an episode, and it's free. Friday's Prayerful Posse delves into those China moves by Pope Leo and more. Visit RaymondArroyo.com for all the links. The assassination of Charlie Kirk was truly an act of domestic terror. Why is violence replacing political discourse in America? And Russia launched drones into Poland. Could these events in Europe and the Middle East combine into a worldwide conflict? With analysis, I'm joined by former CIA officer and defense and counterterrorism analyst and president of Lopez Liberty, Clare Lopez. Clare, thank you for being here. We originally intended to have you on to address the latest developments in that Israeli-Hamas conflict, but Wednesday's assassination of Charlie Kirk has shown that domestic terrorism is certainly an increasing factor in American life. Your thoughts, Clare, on what we saw at Utah Valley University earlier this week, obviously a planned political assassination.
Yeah, absolutely, Raymond. And I think the first thing to say is what a terrible loss, of course, for Charlie and his family, his beautiful wife and 2 children and rest of the family, but for America. This was a young man with such great promise who had already accomplished so much in terms of reaching out to young people in particular on college campuses. He spoke in defense of our Judeo-Christian principles that undergird our democratic republic in this country. And maybe that's what was not so well appreciated by some. What I would say is that the steady drumbeat of vile rhetoric, vile and violent rhetoric over these last weeks, months, cannot but have instigated, helped, prompted some, like perhaps, we don't know yet, but perhaps this shooter to go over the edge. We don't know yet what his situation is, but those who are already unstable, that kind of rhetoric can and does push some over the edge.
We are seeing now, Claire, pictures of persons of interest that the FBI is asking for people to call if you've seen this guy. And again, we don't know if this is the shooter or not. It's a person of interest. A possible murder weapon was found wrapped in a towel nearby at a home. Shell casings found there and still in the weapon have trans and anti-fascist messages engraved on them. What should we take from all of this? The murder suspect is still at large.
Right. So again, we don't know that the photos released by officials are of the actual shooter. We should be clear. Could be person of interest at this point in time. But yes, authorities have found the bolt action rifle that the shooter apparently used, tossed away in a forested area near the campus of the university. And on it, reportedly, have found fingerprints, as well as unspent cartridges, casings, as well, which would seem to point to perhaps this was not a professional killer who would otherwise, it seems, would have worn gloves and not left such evidence behind. But if the reports about what is written on that rifle, on those shell casings and unspent rounds, is accurate, it is being reported, at least, that there, as you said, Raymond, there are messages on there, wording on there about trans and anti-fascist rhetoric. We'll have to see exactly what that is.
Yeah, well, and there's it only rang a bell for me because he was asked, Charlie Kirk was asked about shooters and trans shooters in particular when that bolt engaged and that bullet flew. On August 22nd, in a shocking attack, there was that Ukrainian young lady, 23-year-old, sitting quietly on a light rail train in Charlotte, North Carolina. Suddenly, this guy from behind her, a repeat offender, stabs her in the neck, kills her. Security video shows the attacks of her final moments. And I have to say, the passive behavior of the bystanders ignoring her as she bled to death is simply horrendous. Americans seem to have a higher tolerance for this violence now, Claire, than perhaps in recent memory. Your thoughts? What is happening to us here?
You know, I noticed the same thing about the other passengers in that railway car. Before the attack even, every single one that we could see in the frame of the videos that have been released, every single one of them was engrossed on their phones. They were not alert to anything going on around them, as unfortunately was the victim herself. Not to blame the victim, but to your point that, you know, there is simply a detachment when people are continuously absorbed in their phones and a lack of situational awareness. But to get to the horrific murder and this killer who had been released.
Yeah. There's also the rumination and the repetition of watching these violent acts on your phone. And I noticed young people yesterday, the shot of poor Charlie getting killed, people were passing that thing around and they're watching it on a loop. This does something to the psyche and the mind of a human being, and I don't think it's good. And I mean, we saw that church shooting in Minneapolis. Why do you think there's an uptick in these acts of violence, especially in areas you wouldn't expect, Utah, North Carolina, and against people of faith?
Well, I think you've nailed it right there, Raymond. It is against people and symbols of faith. And again, I'll go back to what I said in our opening comments there, and that is the combined effect over all of these weeks and months, maybe longer, of vile, hostile rhetoric coming from some across the United States against people of faith, against, of course, President Trump and his supporters, the MAGA movement in particular. I mean, that kind of rhetoric, again, repeated over and over again. If you really take the message and believe that, President Trump, that Christians are evil and need to be eliminated from the earth. Again, unstable people. Now, this person who killed the young woman on the train, or again, if this person in Utah yesterday turns out to be trans, the question has to be, what are their medical situations, their psychological situations? Are they taking drugs? Are they habitual users of marijuana? How about vaping, which sometimes uses marijuana? All of these things are question marks at this point, remain to be looked into. But I think the cumulative effect of all of that taken together can tip vulnerable people over the edge.
I want to look at the international scene. On Tuesday, Israel attacked a group of Hamas leaders gathered in Doha, Qatar. And the Hamas leaders were meeting to consider a U.S. proposal for a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. The strike killed 6 people, 5 Hamas members, and a Qatari officer. The White House confirmed they received prior notice of the Israeli strike, but did not support Israel's decision to strike the Qatari capital. Claire, U.S. officials said the airstrikes undermine diplomatic objectives of both the United States and Israel. What do you make of Israel's expansion of its strikes outside of Gaza? Is this productive?
I'll refer to a headline I saw yesterday or so, a couple days ago maybe, and that headline was that President Trump is trying to thread the needle between Israel and Qatar. Now, of course, we are partners, friends, allies of the Jewish state of Israel, which was violently, viciously attacked on October the 7th. And then much more recently, the day before that attack got the green light in Doha, Qatar, there was another. Hamas took responsibility for it. Hamas attack by its military branch, the Izzadin al-Qassam brigades, against civilians waiting at a bus stop in Jerusalem, slaughtering 6 of them and injuring more. So these are the triggers that got Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to greenlight the operation. But more even broadly than that, yes, Qatar is a United States ally. We have the great big Al Udeid Air Force Base there. I don't know why. It should be someplace else, in my opinion. But the point being that Qatar is a supporter, a backer of not only the Muslim Brotherhood for decades, but of Hamas itself, and obviously these Hamas leadership figures who were eliminated in that very surgical, by the way, surgical strike a few days ago. That is what happens when Israel stands up, rising lion, and fights back. And again, it followed not just the horrific October 7 massacre, but also the role, it gets to the role of Qatar in harboring and giving safe haven to Hamas, to funding Hamas, to helping provide it with weapons and other support, including Al Jazeera, meaning media support. This was a long time in coming, and I think Israel has additionally warned any other Hamas leadership that no matter where they are, if they are Hamas and they have been involved in support for the October 7 Shabbat massacre, they are a target.
Claire, Poland said on Wednesday that several Russian drones entered its territory over a course of many hours, and they were shot down with the help of NATO allies, describing the incursion into Poland as an act of aggression carried out during a wave of Russian strikes on Ukraine. What do we know, Claire, about these Russian drones and drone activity over Poland?
So in the past, over the months and indeed years of this war after Russia invaded Ukraine in February of 2022, from time to time, an occasional or couple, 3 occasional drones have strayed we'll go ahead and use that word, strayed over the Ukrainian border to the west and over Poland's territory. Now, this was a different situation. This was as many, I've heard different numbers, but as many as 15 to maybe almost 20 what they call suicide or kamikaze drones that not just crossed that border, Ukraine's western border with Poland, but traveled as far as over 150 miles into over Polish territory, at which point, as you say, NATO scrambled jets, and involved were jets from Poland, of course, itself, also Italy, Netherlands, and I think I heard Germany as well. What this was Vladimir Putin, president of Russia, conducting not just provocation, but a probe to see what would be NATO's response. Is it going to stand up, unify, and defend NATO territory? Vladimir Putin, as well as those around him, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, the Deputy of the Security Council, Dmitry Medvedev, the one I call Putin's Rasputin, Alexander Dugin, they've all specifically, and in English online, directly threatened Poland, as well as the Baltic states, all of which are NATO members.
Yeah, and they've been also doing military exercises with Belarus, which I don't have time to get into, but we'll do that next time. Today marks the 24th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks. The ceremony began as it does every year at this time, with the reading of the nearly 3,000 victims of the 9/11 attacks, plus the victims of the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. Claire, what have we learned in the 24 years since that attack? And that mantra, never forget, is thrown around often without any direct discussion of the ideology behind the attacks. So perhaps, I guess, the better question is, what have we forgotten?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right to be asking those questions. I'll mention also that the night of September 11/12 is also the anniversary of the 2012 Al-Qaeda jihadi attack in Benghazi, in Libya, against our people, our mission, our special compound there, as well as the CIA base across town, in which 4 Americans were killed. What have we learned? What have we forgotten? Well, I was an expert witness in a legal case about 9/11 called the Havlish versus Bin Laden et al., heard by Judge George Daniels in the Southern District of New York Federal District Court, in which Judge George Daniels, issued a ruling in late December of 2011 that Iran and Hezbollah were jointly co-responsible with Al-Qaeda for those attacks of 9/11. Yes, obviously also the Taliban played a role, also Saudi Arabia played a role too. But Iran was the regime that orchestrated and directed those attacks, and what we have not learned, even though all of this information, including the affidavit that I co-authored, all of this is online and openly available since 2011, we have not understood or ever held accountable the regime in Iran for its role in 9/11.
Claire, we will leave it there. Could talk to you all day. Thank you for your time and insight.
Thank you very much for having me.
So our prayers are certainly with all of those families still enduring the fallout from 9/11. There's so many lives lost there, so many lives changed that day. And of course, Charlie Kirk's family, and for the repose of Charlie's soul, we join the world in that prayer as well. Until next time, we'll be scouting the world over for all that is seen and unseen. On behalf of the staff and crew of EWTN News, thank you for watching. I'm Raymond Arroyo. Bye now.